born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, Curtis began his study of the occult sciences at the tender age of 18, after having experienced Christianity and Islam. His search for something more first led him to a study of the Silva mind control and the works of Dr. Nathaniel Brandon. His studies then took him further into the works of Dr. Connie Zweig and Aleister Crowley, as well as Kemetic sciences, the sciences of ancient Egypt. He then decided to share this knowledge with the world via the Occult Science Radio, which he launched in April 2008. His website is theoccultnetwork.com. So once again, theoccultnetwork.com. Ladies and gentlemen, Curtis Davis. But first, we have a small video presentation.
I just want to thank everybody for being here today. That's what we're here for, free our minds. And I'm so honored. Can you hear me? Okay.
It's Curtis. You can hear him without the mic.
But I'm so honored to be here today amongst this roster of great speakers. I mean, I've learned so much. I'm quite sure everybody has as well. And just want to thank my good friend Mark Passio for giving me the opportunity to be here today. But like I said, many of us have been doing this for a very long time. And during the course of our research, we've always illuminated the forces out there and what they're doing to us. And when I did my own research on it, the Illuminati, the Bilderberg, however you want to classify it, I wondered, well, how did they get so much power? Not only how did they become so powerful, but how did they maintain their power? And us as whistleblowers, or truth seekers, if you will, how do we break that power? Do we do it by marching? The Occupy movement? Marching on City Hall? And then I realized these methods have been going on for quite some time, and apparently they're not working because these people are still in power and they're striving to increase their power, which means to take away our rights. So I realized, well, how exactly do we free our minds? How do we break their power? And then I realized you do it by going within. Because to continuously rail against them, however you want to do it, marching, whatever, you're basically telling them they still don't get it. Because they're still trying to fight us outwardly. They want to keep us focused externally. And as long as we do that, we can't go within, where the real power is. Okay, so I really began to research that. And being a big fan of psychology, I came across the works of Dr. Nathaniel Branden, Neville Goddard, Dr. Connie Zweig. Because even when I was growing up, I was constantly told by the people around me, don't strive too high. You're only going to get so far. Okay? Because there's always someone out there that's going to hold you back. And what gives somebody out there more power over me? I refuse to believe that this creator that created everything and everyone set it up that way. There's just something in me that wouldn't allow me to believe that the creator actually designed all of this for one man to oppress another. So when I came across the works of Dr. Nathaniel Branden, and I must say, out of all the authors that I've encountered, and we're all avid readers here, Dr. Branden had the most profound effect on my life. Why do I say that? Because, in my opinion, he has the best methods for going within and breaking the chains on our minds. Because through religion, or organized distorted doctrine, as I call it, that's my name, organized distorted doctrine, right? Mass media and the public fool system, which I'm quite sure many of us have experienced. We were also taught to focus outwardly as well. We weren't taught how to think, we were taught what to think. Big difference. So that whatever changes that we needed to make in our personal lives, as well as society, we needed to do something externally about it. And then I also realized that the public fool system was another one of their tools. Teach us how to obey, not to evolve. So now, as long as we continue to focus outwardly, we're going to always remain in a state of powerlessness. Because change is made from the inside out, not the outside in. As long as we maintain our focus out there on what the Illuminati is doing, what the Bilderbergs are doing, what the Vatican's doing, then you keep yourself in a state of powerlessness, fear, weakness. And that's exactly what they want us to do. That's why you see the advent of all this mass media, iPhones, 3,000 cable channels now, constantly keep you looking out there. So, the only reason why these oppressors, as we call them, or these people that we see, the evil ones, the only reason why they continue to exist is because our energy is feeding them. As long as we continue to focus on them, then they're always going to be here because we're creating them. Because what's out there is just us externalized. So now, if we're running around and we're constantly focusing on the Vatican, the Illuminati, and what they're doing to us, then it's our energy that's constantly creating that. Because if you truly understand natural law, and I learned this from my friend here, we create our own reality. So now, how exactly do we free our minds? What methods do we use? And when I was studying Dr. Brandon's work, I came across something, and to me, when I put it to work in my own life, it helped me face a lot of my inner oppressors to break the chains, and it's called the sentence completion technique. Now, what exactly is the sentence completion technique? The sentence completion technique is a technique whereby one sits down with pen and paper. For those of you who have pen and paper, you could follow along with us. Sits down with pen and paper and writes various sentence stems, and then writes responses as quickly as possible without giving any thought to these responses. You don't think, you just write. Okay, for example, I feel powerless when, like 6 to 10 endings. Don't think, just write. Because if you think, you inhibit the process. It's not to be analytical. You're trying to get to that part of you that's creating these outer obstructions. Just write 6 to 10 endings. Sometimes I feel helpless when I, once again, write this down, 6 to 10 endings or more. I feel fear when I, and for anyone who, for example, if you want to write an ending to one of these sentences, I feel powerless when, be something like, oh, when I'm approached, or when I get pulled over by a police officer. Just write. Don't analyze, just write. If I persist in blaming others for my life, if I continue to see myself as a victim, when I think of some of the lies that I live by, I'm beginning to see that. And when I feel fear, last one. When I feel powerless, now once again, after writing these sentence stems, proceed to write them as rapidly as possible. Don't think, once again, I have to emphasize, don't think, just write. 6 to 10 endings or more. Do these exercises every morning and every evening, and I found this to be very powerful before you start your day and before you retire in the evening. Do more if you can. You don't have to stay 6 to 10 endings, because once you begin this process, you're going to find that you open up. And naturally, there's going to be a lot of repetitions. Don't worry about that. Because many of us, because of the society that we live in, we have a lot of trash to get out, to clean out. Okay, so just take your time. But you'll also find that what will inevitably occur is that new answers begin to come to you. You begin to see where the chains have been put on your mind. You begin to get new insights. And you start to energize your entire self when you do this. First time I did this, I must admit it was very frightening, because it helped me face a side of myself that I was taught to growing up in a Christian household, raised by a devoutly Christian grandmother. I had to get a lot of that out of my head. And then at the end of the week, what you do, you go back and you revisit what you wrote from Monday through Friday. And then a sentence then to follow up with that is, if any of what I wrote this week is true, it would be helpful if I, and just write. Now, doing this work, the idea is to empty your mind of any expectations concerning what will happen or what's supposed to happen. Do not impose any demands on the situation. Keep in mind empty your mind of any expectations or how you should feel or how you should operate. And once you begin to do this, once you begin to do these exercises, you're going to discover that you set in motion forces that make it virtually impossible for you to live more consciously. An average session shouldn't take any more than 10 minutes. If it takes any longer than that, you're thinking too much. Okay? Don't sit there and analyze. Okay? Now, once again, you do these exercises on a daily basis, and you will find yourself becoming more internally oriented than externally oriented. You'll find yourself becoming more autonomous in your thinking. You're not as affected by CNN, Fox 5, and all the other crap that they feed to us on a daily basis. Now, when I began to do these exercises, I got very angry. I also became very fearful because I began to realize that many of the things that were taught to me by family, the public school system, church, was all a bunch of lies. But then I realized I can't really blame them because they were only teaching me what they were taught. That a lot of this was handed down from generation to generation, so they didn't know any better themselves. But for some reason, I couldn't seem to shake the fear and the anger. And I began to block it out of my mind, thinking that, well, if I maintain this fear and this anger, it's going to inhibit my elevation. Because what organized distorted doctrine teaches us is to not feel what we feel. Put it behind us. Get thee behind me, Satan. Give it to Jesus. And what I learned from studying the occult, as well as psychology, one of the most powerful things you can do is to feel, to experience your emotions. So now, how do we feel with the various emotions and feelings that arise in us on a daily basis? Just by accepting them, by honoring reality. What do I mean by that? This is what I'm feeling right now, at the moment that I'm feeling it. You breathe into it, rather than tense yourself against it. Because when you tense yourself against it, there's no old saying, bad psychology makes bad biology. These emotions get stored up in our bodies, which then create cancer and any other physical ailments that you could name. Every physical ailment that you can think of is tied to some repressed or suppressed emotion. I had a gentleman on my show not too long ago, and we were talking about cancer. And right about that time, the famous boxer, Joe Frazier, had recently passed away from liver cancer. And when we were talking, when he was teaching us about the chakras and how various emotions create various ailments, Joe Frazier died of liver cancer. And liver cancer usually stems from years of repressed anger, unexpressed anger. So when we look around and we see we may have poor eyesight, we may have whatever, they're all tied to unexpressed emotions. And we were taught that. We weren't taught to feel our emotions and our feelings. We were taught to suppress them. But once again, bad psychology makes bad biology. So now, in order to keep the energy flowing, because all it is energy, you must feel what you feel. Breathe into your emotions. Breathe into your feelings. And that's the only way you're going to be whole. See, organized distorted doctrine doesn't teach us to be whole. It teaches us just to give it to Jesus, pray to God, and don't think any bad thoughts. I also discovered the work of Dr. Connie Zweig, who wrote an excellent book called Romancing the Shadow. I highly recommend everyone get that book. It's about shadow work. Now, it's been made commercial recently by Debbie Ford. And Debbie's done great work. I follow her work religiously. But she learned it from the people that taught me, Dr. Connie Zwei, Jeremiah Abrams, and I'm glad to see that this type of information has really come to the forefront. Because I've had people ask me, well, what exactly is shadow work? Shadow work basically is taking a look at that side of us that we have been programmed away from looking at. Let me say that again. Shadow work is a process of looking at that part of ourselves that we have been programmed to ignore. Get behind me, Satan. It's called shadow work, but I like to call it our inner Lucifer, our inner Satan. Well, why do I call it that? When we look at things from a quote-unquote religious point of view, we were taught that Satan and God are two separate entities. And even as a child, it didn't sit right with me, because I figured, well, if God is the creator of everything and everyone, didn't God create Satan? So wouldn't that make Satan a part of him? And then I began to meditate about this stuff. And then I started studying shadow work. And that's when it hit me. Wow, all Satan is God's shadow side. He's known as Lucifer, the light bringer. If he's a light bringer and he's bringing the light of knowledge, he can't be that bad of a God. And if this all-powerful force sought to create it and allowed it to continue to exist, it can't be as bad as we've been taught. But then I realized, and this was very frightening when this insight came to me, that good and evil are merely man-made concepts. That even when we perceive what is evil, that's God as well. Now, we've been taught that when you see something good, when you see something bad, the Columbine shooting, Sandy Hook, the recent bombing in Boston, that was the devil that did that. God would never do a thing like that. Much like many of us think about our government. Oops, did I say that? And I realized on a more esoteric level that this God, this all-powerful force, it just didn't want to experience good things. It wanted to experience everything. It wanted to experience giving life. It also wanted to experience what would be like to take a life. And I said, wow. So you mean to tell me, even when I see, if I look at the morning news and I hear that some hurricane just took out an entire town, that's God as well? So in order for us to become truly whole, we have to look at the inner, our bad side. See, because many of us were programmed and to see ourselves as angelic perfection. That side of ourselves, that side of me that likes to drink, that likes to get high, that likes to do all these things that society claims is not good. We don't have to look at that side of ourselves. Let's just focus on our good points. Well, I'm here to tell you, when you have that attitude, you keep yourself very fragmented. You're not whole, because you're not experiencing all of you. And what I learned, in opposition to what we've been taught, always seek the light. If you constantly seek the light, once again, you're very fragmented. For the most deepest treasures lie in the dark. And the so-called controllers know that. They want to keep you focused on that angel inside you. Because what does that do? It keeps you passive. So now when we start our gun control campaigns and convince everyone to turn over their arms to us, then that puts them in a state of passivity. And it makes them a little bit easier to control. But see, that just goes to show you the dumbed down state that they have the masses in. They have people so ignorant that they're actually convincing you to turn over your weapons of self-protection, if you will, to the enemy, to the very people that want to conquer you. Doesn't it sound like madness? So now, when we talk about shadow work, when you begin to do shadow work, you face the inner warrior inside of you. Now, once you begin to face that inner warrior inside of you, when the forces of oppression come against you, you're not going to be so easy to conquer. And that's the one thing they really want to keep us away from. That's why in so many instances, when we may have confrontations with the quote-unquote authorities, and I hate calling them that, because they don't have the authority over anyone or anybody. They only have the authority that we give them. No one has the right to have any authority over anyone. But nevertheless, we always tend to cooperate rather than agitate. Why should we submit to being arrested by some law enforcement official who's working for, I would say, the biggest criminals on the planet? But yet, I also realize that they're also in a state of ignorance as well. They do not realize who they're working for and what they represent. Because they've been programmed to believe that, oh, you're serving your country, you're serving your society. Really? Serving my country and serving my society by taking away the rights of my fellow citizens, and I have the right to do that because I have a gun and a badge, and you're just a bullshit civilian? I can smack you around anytime I want to? Okay. So now, shadow work brings us in touch with the warrior in us. And now here again, I obviously want to illuminate another tool of mind control by the controllers. Through interpretation of the scriptures, people have been rendered powerlessness, which leads to passivity. A passive and powerless populace is easy to control, right? I mean, once you have someone in a state of fear, which produces powerlessness, which then leads to passivity, then it's easy to conquer them. Which leads me to encourage the masses to seek the darkness. Stay away from the light of Jesus. It's all a mind screw. I know I'm going to get in some trouble for that. Because that's contrary to everything we've been taught. Okay? But as occultists, as metaphysicians, truth seekers, whistleblowers, I've learned that, to put it all in a nutshell, everything that we were told not to do, that's what we should be doing. And everything that we were told to do, that's what we shouldn't be doing. Because everything we were told to do was to be in servitude to them. And everything we were told not to do was to not make them uncomfortable. Don't rock the boat. Don't misbehave. So as I stated earlier, shadow work taught me to open up to my shadow side, my dark side, my inner Darth Vader. I guess that's why I sound like it. And that's when it really got scary, because this takes a challenging level of honesty, because we don't want to acknowledge that there's a side of us that's screwed up. That's one of the toughest things for us to do, to focus on our strengths, not our weaknesses. We don't want to focus on our shortcomings. So I didn't begin to really feel whole until I took a look at that side of myself. And it all starts with accepting, self-acceptance. How do we look at ourselves? How do we look at that side of ourselves that makes us go, oh, that can't be me. That can't be me. That guy that does a kilo of cocaine a week, that drinks gallons of liquor, that can't be me. I don't want to see that side of me. That's the side of you that you need to look at and need to accept that part of yourself. A problem that's not acknowledged and brought to the light cannot be solved. You can't see it because it hasn't been brought to the light. Now, when I say self-acceptance, acceptance doesn't mean liking. It has nothing to do with liking. It's just accepting the fact that right now, this is me. This is what I'm experiencing at this moment in time. So now, if you're sitting there and you may be thinking about someone that made you angry, right now, I'm feeling anger. I'm breathing into it. Accept it. Because when you begin to accept who and what you are, you begin to expand. You begin to truly feel whole. You begin to break the chains. That's the process. The process begins the process of freeing your mind. So when we begin to not just accept our bad parts, but the good parts of us as well. Because another mind screw we've been taught by family, organized, distorted doctrine, and for those of us who attended the public school system, don't think too highly of yourself. Be humble. Minimize yourself. Don't maximize yourself. Don't be too proud of your accomplishments. Because if you're too proud of your accomplishments and who and what you are, people will see you as cocky, narcissistic. But when you maximize yourself, when you're proud of who and what you are, of everything that you are, that's operating at a God level. Never let anyone tell you to minimize yourself. Because you know why they're telling you that? They're telling you that because you maximizing yourself makes them uncomfortable. You maximizing yourself may bring up shadow feelings in them. Your success may shed light on their lack of productivity. So now if I'm successful, and I might go around some friends and family who are not as successful as I am, I have to come down to their level because I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. They're not as productive as I am. So in order not to make them feel uncomfortable, in order not to make them jealous, then instead of bringing them up to my level, I'll go down to theirs. You just gave away your power. Anyone that requires you to minimize yourself is not your friend. Doesn't give a damn about you because they're telling you to remain powerless, to remain in a state of non-productivity. And you're going to find that once you rise, once you begin to undertake this work, naturally, your reality now is going to begin to change. Friends that you may have been, people you may have been friends with for a very long time, all of a sudden you fall out with them. It's inevitable. Not unless they are doing the same things that you're doing. family members that you were close to. You may find that they're gone from your life. And I came across an old saying a long time ago, don't worry about the people in your past. There's a damn good reason why they didn't make it to your present and your future. Don't cling to them. That's why all the great masters always said, never cling to anything. Because if you cling to something, then you remain there. So now, as we rise, we have to be willing to risk that what we have now in order to rise. Because what's out there is only a mirror of what's in here. So if you look at your external reality and you're not happy with it, change it. You created it. We have that power. You created it, and you also have the power to change it. So shadow work is definitely a way to free the mind. That's why I highly recommend the works of Dr. Brandon, Dr. Zweig, Jungian psychology. You know, I've also studied Neville Goddard and also recently discovered the works of Bill Donahue on YouTube. I highly recommend it. So when I look around at what's going on in the world today, the recent police abuse on American citizens, gun laws, disarm the masses. Well, see, first of all, before they disarm you physically, they have to disarm you mentally. Let's go back to what I said a few minutes ago about gun control laws. Now they realize that they just can't go up to citizens and say, give me your gun, you can't carry a gun anymore, you can't have any more weapons. No, that would be too barbaric. America is not like that. So we have to do something that's going to create fear, that's going to instill a feeling of powerlessness, which is also going to lead to passivity. So now if we stage a bombing in Boston, our government would never do things like that. But just follow along with me here. Okay. The staged event in Sandy Hook, government would never do that, but I'm just speaking hypothetically. People have to realize that these are merely distractions. This is just part of their tools of mind control. Because they realize that we are dealing with a deaf, dumb, and blind man. We can put the secrets right in front of their face and they will still reject it. We have these people so freaking stupid that they don't realize that we're their enemy. And we're convincing them to turn their arms over to us, which in turn is going to help us conquer them. And that's some mind control for your ass. So now, how can people not see this? But then I realize they don't know what we know. Many people out there do not know what we know. And the fact that the people we have here shows that people are waking up. The average person out on the street has the feeling that, what can you do? You can't fight City Hall. Yeah, I know in the United States, I know George Bush was behind 9/11, but what can you do? I would rather continue to believe that it was Osama bin Laden that did it. That's more comfortable. Because if I begin to contemplate the fact that, wow, the guy in the White House who's supposed to be protecting our rights actually killed his own citizens just for some money and power. That's scary. And I don't want to believe that. So what do? I run from it. And then what do? You minimize yourself. Because you're not allowing yourself to see. You're looking, but you're not seeing. Big difference. You refuse to see what's there. And when you do that, you give away your power. You must be able to not just look, but to see. And even if it's frightening, you have a choice. I see this. Now, do I retreat and continue to remain in an ignorant state? Or do I press forward, even though I'm scares the shit out of me? Do I press forward? That's the ultimate decision. And unfortunately today, many people, and I deal with it every day, what I tell people, what just went on in Boston, White House is behind that. No. Our government would never do that to us. And then I also encounter people, well, yeah, Curtis, I kind of know that there's some monkey business going on, but I don't want to look at that. It's too frightening. The truth is frightening. The truth is empowering. What about the truth is there to be afraid of? So now, I also mentioned it to Bill Donahue. And with regard to organized distorted doctrine, I have not seen a gentleman who really brings home what the Bible literally represents. And then I realized that, wow, that's another part of their mind control. Interpret the Bible literally. Don't tell them that the Bible is allegorical and historical. I mean, not historical, metaphorical. Let's convince them to think that it's historical. Let's convince them that there's some nice guy in the sky and the ultimate asshole in the ground. And when you begin to see God and Satan as something outside of you, once again, you just gave away your power. There's no external God or demon outside of you. You are God. You also are Satan. That's the part of us that we don't want to look at. The worst thing you can do is to interpret the Bible literally. And then once again, studying the occult, because, and many of us here can relate to that, when you begin to study the occult, first thing that you do is just totally discredit the Bible. Get that religious crap out of here. It's been messing up people's minds. But then as I began to study, the Bible is the greatest occult book ever written, if read correctly. It's the ultimate tool of evolution. And I said, well, wow, if I'm studying the occult and I was told that the Bible was a tool of mind control, then how could it be the ultimate occult book ever written? And then I realized it's the misinterpretation of the scriptures. When you look at the Bible, everything in the Bible is talking about you. Moses never existed. Noah's Ark never existed. They are all aspects of your mind. No, Jesus didn't even exist either. Or anyone that you come across in the Bible are not historical figures. They are all aspects of your mind. And when you read the Bible from that mentality, that when you open it from Genesis to Revelations, it's talking about you. It's teaching me who I am and what I am capable of. Then you get a whole new perspective. And then I realized they're hiding the secrets in plain sight. Now let me tell you something about the controllers, and I'm stealing Mark's word. Controllers. As sinister as their plan is, they're genius. Because when you can come up with a plan that lasts for millions of years, you started your plan in 2 BC, and your plan is still effective in 2013, it's genius. You gotta give them props. That is genius. And I have a certain admiration and respect for that, because they were able to keep people in a state of ignorance for so very long. Now, I was listening to one of Mark's radio shows, and he said something that is probably going to stay with me for a very long time. He broke down the difference between ignorance and ignorance. You know, there's a difference. Ignorance and ignorance. Ignorance is when you genuinely do not know. Everyone who's here right now, because you spent 3 days here, even if you came here ignorant, you're not going to leave here ignorant, because after listening to all these great speakers here, believe me, I'm not one of them. I'm just a space filler. I'm not that smart. Okay.
Don't minimize yourself.
Yeah.
Precisely. And I thank you for that. But when you leave here after these 3 days, you can no longer claim ignorance. Because now you know. Now what is ignorant? Ignorant is someone who doesn't know and doesn't want to know. They're married to their stupidity. See, it's one thing to realize I'm ignorant, but I want to know. No one can blame you for being ignorant. But yes, you can be held accountable for being ignorant. Because having the truth right in front of your face and just choosing not to see it, that's the reason why we're in this mess today. Because too many people are like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, Curtis. I hear what you're saying, Mark. I hear what you're saying, Larkin. I hear what you're saying, Bob. But I don't want to look at that stuff. It's too frightening. That's ignorance. So keep in mind, you can't be held accountable for being ignorant, but you can be held accountable for being ignorant. Don't allow yourself to be ignorant. I mean, many of us in here are ignorant of something. But you have to strive to learn. So now, when we look at these outside forces, let's not pay so much attention to them. How about we figure out who we are and what we're capable of?
Right.
That always sitting around and worrying, oh, look at what the Illuminati did now. Look at what's going on with the Vatican. Monsanto. They're poisoning the food. They're doing this. They're doing that. Stop focusing on these guys. It's our energy that's continuously feeding them. They need us. And when we pull the plug on these guys by freeing our minds, whatever they built is going to crumble, because it's our energy. But when you study the laws of attraction, you realize that I'm creating those guys. So turn away from them. Don't worry about them. Let whatever the Rothschilds and the Bilderbergs and whatever they're doing out there in Bohemian Grove, so frickin' what? None of those people with all their money and everything is greater than you. And they got it from us anyway, by keeping us deaf, dumb, and blind. Until now, we're not deaf, dumb, and blind anymore. We're all here at the Free Your Mind conference. So now, once again, you can no longer claim ignorance, because you know. So going back to shadow work and how it relates to occult studies, when I began to practice this information, like I said, it really grew me. And with regard to natural law, because that's what it really focuses on. Studying the occult has taught me some really mind-blowing things. And once again, those of us, or those who I perceive to be more powerful than I am, well, how did they get that way? How did they achieve that power? How do they maintain that power? And it's all a mindset. Because when I began to study natural law as opposed to man's law, see, don't study man's laws. Man's laws were designed to keep you in a cage. And when you begin to study universal law, you realize that, well, and I've had a lot of debates with this, but the universe really knows no morality. It knows no good and evil. Those are man-made concepts. What we've been programmed to think is bad might be the best, and what we've been programmed to think is good might be the worst. It's a mind screw. And then I realized that those so-called oppressors, they have a totally different mindset than the average guy who's working 9 to 5 every day, just trying to feed his family. So now when we look at these people and we call them evil, sinister, the worst jerks in the world, are we judging them from, how can I put this? Are we judging them or looking at them from a sense of morality, an erroneous sense of morality that was programmed into us by those who've been most influential in our lives? Organized, distorted doctrine, the public fool system. Because if so, then why am I where I am and why are they where they are? It all begins here. Wow, I could stay here all day and talk. And this is very enjoyable. But wow, I really enjoyed this, and we have to get to the next speaker. So once again, how do we free our minds? Shadow work, psychological work. I highly recommend the works of Dr. Nathaniel Branden, Dr. Connie Swide. You could Google them. Read any and everything that they wrote. And then you'll begin to truly free your mind. Before I go, I'm also the host of Occult Science Radio. Google Occult Science Radio. You'll see all of my podcasts. And visit us at theoccultnetwork.com. That's theoccultnetwork.com. And there you're going to find a lot of information, much of what you've been hearing here. But I thank you, and everyone, let's continue to free our minds.